right, hello there. Just, you know, finished reading The Stranger by Albert Camus and just wanted to give my opinion on it. A little bit different than my normal book reviews. I wanted to kind of analyze it more than review it in that sense. I will review it too, but I just wanted to explain it more because, I'm into philosophy, and on this channel we talk about philosophy a bit. And it's a philosophical text in a way. So just for a little background, Camus was an absurdist. Absurdism basically means that you there's no inherent meaning in the universe, so it's up to you to create your own meaning in the absurdity. At the same time, it's important to recognize that meaning that you create is also ultimately meaningless. There's a bit that you have to distinguish to kind of get into the nitty gritty from nihilism versus existentialism, but we're not gonna get into that today. We can do that another day. But yeah, so I just want to talk about this. So just for a quick synopsis, this guy, his name is Mersal. He's Algerian. I'm not so if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. I'm not sure how Mersal or something like that. But basically, at the beginning of the story, it starts with him attending his mother's funeral. He doesn't have a lot of emotion, which I'll get into later. And he then goes back home because his mother was living in a retirement home, and there he meets some guy that, well, he didn't meet him, like he was neighbors with him, but they never really talked until then. Basically, it's a whole. I'm not gonna explain the whole thing, but he unwittingly murders a man, and well, I know how can you unwittingly murder someone? He just kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. He kind of has like a spaz out moment. I'm taking psychopathology right now. I'm sure I could put it into better terms than this, but maybe like a kind of like a panic attack. Yeah, panic attack, I think, is what I would most classify it as. He just takes a lot of note of his physical symptoms, and he starts feeling like really panicked, and he kills a man. And then he has his trial. He gets the death sentence, and he's in prison. He's in prison, contemplating, and so yeah, I just wanted to kind of give my interpretation of the story, what I thought about it, and what I think we can learn from it. So first, just my interpretation of the character, of the main character. Um, I kind of went back and forth between two different ways of seeing him. I either thought of him as really intelligent, like yours truly, or really dull, really bland. And at the end, I think I settled on really bland because he kind of had one of those. It was hard to distinguish because he had one of those temperaments. I guess it's like that bell curve, right? Where like the the extremes are like more similar to each other than either of them would be to the middle. But like I did settle on really bland because he just has that sort of he just has it's it's uh it's first person, so he just has that sort of you can really see what his mind is thinking, and you're really in his mind, and he just has that like nothing's going on up there kind of like vibe. I'm sure I could speak more eloquently than this. He possesses that when you look at someone and you see their eyes, and you don't see it much going on behind them. That's what he that's what his vernacular, his way of describing things, that's what it represents to me. He's just there, he's just living. Um there's some reference to him having aspirations when he was younger, but now he's sort of given up on them, and he just lives how he lives. And I suppose this is how I suppose that's the point of the story. My interpretation of the story is that it is a world exactly like ours, but it's godless. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So obviously Camus was a atheist, because he thought there was no inherent meaning. But so I know he obviously wouldn't have intended it for it to be read this way, but the way he describes it is just so. The world just feels so uncanny. Like there's nothing about it supernatural or science fiction that makes it unlike our world in any regard, but the way, maybe it's for me. I'm just not thinking about this. Maybe it's for me. Maybe my way of thinking is so much more full of life and not dull and bland. Watch my NPC video uh, for before you just call it hubris on my end, but it just presents a worldview that's so godless that, yeah, if you were living like how he lived, I could see how you'd have no really mentality but to be like atheist and not a believer as the main character was. um it just really seems really monotonous. He just lives day by day, and he just kind of, I've made this analogy before to my friends, but I feel like those who are not philosophically inclined, who just live off instinct and reason almost, they seem to be like mere animals. They just react to the stimulation that's around them, but they don't really put much more thought into that. It's just their 9 to 5. They work, they pay their bills, and then they pleasure themselves. Not in that way, but they just, whatever leftover money they have, they spend it on pleasures for themselves, not really chasing the philosophical. But I suppose for him, that's the only thing you can do, because I think chasing the philosophical is only worth something if you believe there's an ultimate form of the good to go for, being which would be God. Um, I mean, Plato wasn't exactly an atheist. He definitely believed in some higher power. He just disagreed with the religious authorities at the time. But I mean, yeah, it is really hard to read. Just in a man who, and it scares me sometimes. Because we can make all these human philosophies like absurdism and existentialism, but it's either nihilism or, I mean, it's either a religion, Jesus in my case, or it's death. And that's it. And he brings up, one of my favorite quotes is, there's no today, only yesterday and tomorrow have any meaning left. Um, because like there just is no here. The only thing that was guaranteed, the only two things that are guaranteed were your birth, because you're living, you're thinking now, so you obviously exist, and your death, and that's it. That's the only thing you can be sure of when you're not religious. And everything in between those 2 points are just an accident. It's not really going to amount to anything. Yeah. And it is really, that's kind of where my nihilistic thoughts come in. But I'll explain those in another video. I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, and another quote I liked was like, let me see if I can find it, because I don't want to mess it up, because it was a really good quote. It's near the end. Let's see. I believe it was something about 20 years, you'll be dead. Let's see. I'll find it. Hold on. There we go. And then it says the chaplain is talking to him before his death sentence is to be carried out. And the chaplain tells him, if you don't die today, you'll die tomorrow or the next day. And then the same question will arise. How will you face that terrifying ordeal? And so this is, the context is that this is, his death sentence is about to be carried out. And I mean, really, Camus kind of touches on this point in his myth of Sisyphus, But this is kind of it played out, right? Like, if your life has no meaning, why don't you just kill yourself? Genuinely, because there's no point. I mean, whether you die today or you die in 30 years, nothing you will have done have mattered. And there's another quote. I think this is the first one I was thinking about. When he's rationalizing the death sentence and trying to go through the scenario of getting his appeal. Deep down, I knew perfectly well that it doesn't much matter whether you die at 30 or at 70, since in either case, other men and women will naturally go on living, and for thousands of years. In fact, nothing could be clearer. Whether it was now or 20 years from now, I would still be the one dying. At that point, what would disturb my train of thought was the terrifying leap I would feel my heart take at the idea of having 20 more years of life ahead of me. But I simply had to stifle it by imagining what I'd be thinking in 20 years when it all come down to the same thing anyway. Since we're all going to die, it's obvious that when and how doesn't matter. So he's about to get his death sentence served, and he wants to appeal, but he has to play out the scenario of getting his appeal rejected to be able to accept it. And he says that he initially gets excited at the prospect of having 20 more years to live. But then he has to calm himself down and think about the absurdity and the reality of the situation. Even if he gets those 20 years, what's it going to matter? He's still going to die at the end of those. And, I mean, that's about it, you know? That's it, nothing happens. Whether you die now, whether you kill yourself, or you live your whole long life, it won't matter. The sun will explode in a few billion years, and all the earth will die. No one will ever remember. And there won't be any trace, you know, that's just it. You're just dead. Yeah. So, it's a good book. I think I interpreted it as, as a godless universe. I suppose that's the point. Maybe that's what the problem with atheists is. Maybe that's just how they see the world, and if you have that worldview, how could you ever convince yourself that there is meaning? And I'll talk more about meaning itself in general and what I think about meaning in society. But yeah, this is just about The Stranger by Camus. So, review, pretty short, not too long. It's only about 120 pages and not a lot of words per page. You know, I'd say overall, cumulatively, probably about 3 to 4 hours of reading time. It's not a very long book, and it's not like hard to read at all. So, if you're not into philosophy, I'll be honest, like I can't see much value it have for you. If you're not into philosophy, I'd give it a 71. I hesitate to give it any more than that because it's not really like, you're not gonna read it for the plot of the story. You know, he just kills someone and gets the death sentence. But if you're into philosophy, you know, I don't think I could give anything by Camus or Dostoevsky or Kafka anything less than a 90. So but this one, it was a little bit underwhelming. Absurdity is kind of a bit underwhelming. Not much there to unpack, so I'll give it a 90. Definitely good. Won't be a waste of your time if you're into philosophy. If you're not, it might be. But definitely check it out. Recommend.